Well, hello. It is Wednesday, September the 16th, 2020. My name is Angela Hooper-Menifield, and I am the Chief Equipping Officer of Menifield and Associates. And so I want to thank you for watching. Today's topic is going to be about performance standards. And of course, for those of you who watch with any regularity, what we try to do here in these HR moments is talk to, organizations without HR departments, new supervisors, but just to help people along this journey of supervision and leadership. And so what brought this topic to mind today actually was I was having a coaching call with a client yesterday. And before our call, they sent over to me some quote unquote performance feedback that they had received from their employer. And as I began to read the documents, it was interesting because before I could even really get to the feedback, I was just in awe of what it was that was being evaluated. So here are a few things that, and of course, we can spend a whole week talking about performance metrics, how to come up with them, and then how to use them to evaluate performance with employees. But today's HR moment, I just really want to focus just a little bit on exactly what are performance standards, because a lot of us think we have them. And I use this phrase very loosely. I say we think we have them because we put words to paper, but they are not performance standards. I don't quite know what it is, but it's not performance standards. So let's just talk a little bit about what a standard should look like. So of course, our performance standards have titles, right? So it could be, customer service, resource management, leading or directing a team, if there's a certain skill that a person does, right? Because, the standard, or we can use the phrase element, has categories. The one in particular that jumped out at me was a person had one that was titled professionalism. And so regardless of what you name it, the standard, so there's a name and then there are words that describe it. And these words should be what I can observe, document, or gather an assessment regarding, right? Because there are, as we would call, objective and subjective performance standards. So an objective performance standard would be for something that is like timeliness of service. And the objectiveness would be that, let's say I turn in a report on every Friday. Theoretically, there are 52 Fridays. And so let's just say we want to use 50 as the rough estimate. And you would say to yourself, okay, there are 50 Friday reports that has to be delivered. What does success look like in this measurement? So we would describe in the body of the standard what success looks like. And theoretically, I would say if we wanted to use a percentage, we would say for the timeliness part, we might say 80 to 90% on time. So what's 90% of 50 or of the 50, right? And then so by having that as the standard, we've done two things. By putting that range in versus a number. Anything below the low number in the range means I didn't meet the standard. Anything above the high number says I did. So if we go back to the 90%, well, 90% of 50 means I can only be late on a half of report a year, right? Because 2 times 50 is 100. So 10% of 100 would be 1. So 10% of the 50 would be a half. That's not even reasonable, because how can you be late on a half a report? So immediately there should be something that goes off in my mind and says, well, 90% can't be the high end because, one, there's no way to exceed the standard. And it has to be reasonable. So maybe I say 75 to 85%. So now the person maybe can have 2 and still be within the standard. But if they are perfect during this 52 weeks or this year, then they've exceeded the standard. But again, so that's an objective one. A subjective one is, again, something like professionalism. we can at least arrive at an understanding of what our definition of something like that is. But it's still subjective. It's my opinion as to whether or not the person did these things. But the standard, again, should cover what does that look like? So what does success look like? What does it look like when done properly? These would be some of the words we would use in the standard. So let me tell you what are some of the things I see. And I've seen this for years. I even saw this when I was in the federal government. And at one point, I actually revamped all the standards within our organization. And then because of how successful we had been with quantifying and creating measurable standards, our standards were actually back then at that time used as a template for the entire agency. And so I tell you that to say that, trust me, if you're struggling with this, you're not alone. This is a common faux pas. So yesterday, going back to my client, they had an element that was actually talking about professionalism. And then the body of it said that the standard was they had to be professional. Now, anybody that, we can talk and be real candid here, right? Like the definition of the word can't be the word. So if the standard is to be professional, then what it's described can't be professionalism. And so immediately I'm starstruck. I'm like, wow. And of course, this person was being rated on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 was does not meet, 2 fully successful, 3 be above successful, 4 exceeding. And they got a 1 point. No, they got a 2 in this one, actually. So it said they were professional. And then there was all this other writings about things that had nothing to do with professionalism that they needed to do. And I'm reading this stuff and I'm thinking, wow, well, here's some basics about performance standards. In addition to them being, what are the requirements or what are the basics that we expect? They need to be agreed upon. So the person, my client, had never even seen these standards until they were given this rating or memo, evaluation, whatever you want to call it. You can't do that. We can't do that as supervisors and managers. So a standard, can be proposed or created by the organization, but it still needs to be given to the employee, signed off upon, met, having a discussion about what success looks like. Also, how do you exceed the standard? And then, any input that they may have. We should both sign them. And then also, 90 days is usually the minimum that you would want to have a person under these standards before they're given feedback. Now, my clients, which also makes this a little unique, is the independent contractor. And so immediately I'm like, well, what does your contract say? Because I think sometimes employers want to hire people or subcontract out so that they don't have employees, but then we want to treat them like employees. So technically, I question why this independent contractor has a performance evaluation. Now, we could look at the contract. What is the language in the contract? Are we in compliance? Are we fulfilling the obligations of the contract? Those are two different conversations. So how we treat a 1099 and how we treat an employee, there are some differences there. So let me give you some examples of what that standard language could look like. It could be some things like opens the office promptly at 8 a.m. See, immediately I know what success looks like. As the employee, I realize that if I don't open the office by 8, that could be a failure to do what I'm asked to do in my standard. And if I'm here every day at 7:45, maybe I'm exceeding the standard, but it's really so clear, right? And then it's the person who has the responsibility to evaluate or measure their performance. I know clearly too how to have that evaluation because they're either here at 8 or they're not. It's like, this is a no-brainer. So it's clear, it's understandable. We can have an agreement on what that looks like. Now, in addition to opens the office promptly at 8 a.m., again, I like, percentage of time. I don't like standards that say always. And some of the standards, again, I saw yesterday talked a lot about always, like the person is always yada, yada, yada. I have found very few jobs where the absence of perfection would result in a critical fail. So let me give you an example. If it's my job to submit report X by 10 o'clock every Friday, I don't know that the company would fall to its needs if I did it by 10:05. Now, and a good standard also builds in cushions because we know life happens. But here's an example of, I would say, perfection would be required. And of course, being a federal employee, and I've gone to some trainings with people who had this as a job, air traffic controllers, right? I could very well see why perfection would be in their job description. Like it should say, planes never crash, right? Perfection. Because what happens if they do? But how many jobs do we have as normal, Jane and Joe's, or Sam and Samantha's, or Angela's and Anthony's, right? How many types of jobs? I've never had a job that failure at being perfect would cause major harm. So ideally, I should not have a standard that requires perfection. And if I'm going to have that, then it just needs to be a pass-fail, right? Why do we have you met it, you didn't meet it, you met it more than the majority of the time, and then you exceeded? Why are all these levels? Because how can you exceed perfection? So as managers and supervisors, again, begin to think about, like, even ask yourselves, is this logically possible? But again, words like always, never, few and far between. Another standard or verbiage in a standard could be that a person would secure backups for absences. So maybe we have a desk, we're a customer service organization, or we're receptionists, and we want to make sure no matter what time of day a client calls or a potential customer, the phone is answered. So it's not that I have to answer it 100% of the time, because, right, I get breaks, I have lunch, I have other things that I can do. But what I am responsible for is ensuring adequate coverage to the point that, again, it's not unmanned. That's a reasonable expectation. So again, we could talk all day about performance measurements. I actually like them. I am, we talk about this all the time. I'm very high C. I like data, I like analytics, and I don't want to have to trust my memory, right? When you're managing a team, and as your team gets bigger, and of course we can talk about organizational structure and how many layers needs to be there, because we really don't want to have a whole lot of people reporting to us, but it can just be a handful. 365 days is a long time, LOL, just ask somebody how they feel about 2020 right now, right? Especially if it's not how, you feel great about it. Am I really supposed to remember at day 366, once the year is over, like what employee A did on day one? So by, having clear and measurable things and something that I can track, I'm currently keeping my records up to date. We should have mid-years, some, I would even say quarterly if doable, discussions. Another thing my clients was a little disturbed about, which I would agree with wholeheartedly, is they had mentions in their appraisal or feedback that was well over a year old. So it's like everything was put in a culmination document. And that's really not how we want to do that either, right? Performance reviews should have a beginning and an end date. It's not forever. So if I've been working there 2 years and you finally decide to give me a rating, no, my rating kicks in on the day I sign the standard. But again, if the standard wasn't signed, we can already see why this was a mishap. And so the last thing I'm going to say is, again, because we could talk about performance measurements all day. Why is this important? Well, as a person who has been sworn in on the stand, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God, right? Like being deposed, being the defendant in employee grievances when they say they were terminated unjustly, not promoted, or whatever. I can tell you that having good documentation, clear expectations, and appropriate languaging can be the difference between a win, a settlement, and a, do what you need to do kind of conversation, right? So my attitude always was when somebody said they were going to file a complaint, I'm like, oh, here, take my phone, right? Do you need to use my office? Because it didn't matter to me. I felt really assured that I had done what I needed to do. Now, I didn't always feel that way. There were some years that it was like, what y'all do, what we do. One of my favorite sayings is, can what you did, the decision you made, the rating you gave, withstand outside scrutiny? If the answer is no, you need help. Right? And of course, that's what I do. I help organizations do that, but you need help. And what do I mean by that? Withstand outside scrutiny. If it ends up in the EEOC office for your state, if it ends up in your company's grievance pile, if it's labor relations, the union files a complaint, whatever the case may be, will it withstand outside scrutiny? The other facet of your documentation should be, do I need you with it in order to understand it? Now, I'm going to let that one sit with you. Do I need you to tag along with the report in order for me to understand it? Because if the answer is yes, you got some terrible documentation. Because you need to explain what you meant. Because here's what, you may not realize, or you don't think about it until you're already, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth part? You can't follow your file when it goes to the state office, the county office, the federal office, the EEOC, the employee relations. You can't walk that file into every person's desk that's going to read it, to the plaintiff's attorney. So your words, your documentation, whatever you did, the justification for it, all your processes have to withstand outside scrutiny and withstand your escorting it. And so again, it's not hard, but if you've never done it before, it may be a little confusing. So get help. I was on a coaching call today with my coach, and one of the things he said, and I just loved it, is like, if you're a 6 on a 10-point scale with something, the best, even if you put time, effort, and money into getting better, you'll probably be as an 8. Pay somebody who's already a 9, 8 or 9 in it to do it for you. So let people do it for you. But it's not that hard for people who know how to do it. Just like I'm sure there's some things you can do and do really well. And I would be like, I have no clue what you just did, So those are my 2 questions I leave you with. Will it withstand outside scrutiny when other eyes look at it? And do you need to be with it in order for it to make sense? So if the answer, to those questions are not correct, then get help. But please, I leave you with please, treat your employees with kindness and give them information and be inclusive in your discussions and have clear expectations and make the standards reasonable. Because if they're impossible to achieve, then people don't want to work with you. And turnover is still, maybe not as high as it was because so many people are unemployed. But the good people who are working for the poor managers, bye-bye. I'm telling you what they're saying, because they want to work somewhere where they'll be valued, where their work product will be appreciated, and they'll get a fair assessment. I remember having a lady tell me one time, she was like, as long as my assessment is fair and I feel as if it's an accurate reflection, or either I understand it, I'm good. I don't even have to agree with it. I'm good. And I believe that's how most people feel. They know that there's going to be some variance sometimes in some small things, but how can they walk away with an accurate understanding? And I can tell you yesterday, my client didn't. And so we recommend too, if you're the employee and as supervisors, we get rated as well. If you have some concerns about your rating, say something. Because when people sign things out of obligation or fear of retaliation, you have disgruntled employees. Again, morale is low, they're disengaged, and you're losing your people. And when they get an opportunity to hop, they're going to. They're going to go somewhere else and work. Or they'll spend all their time and effort getting their documentation together. And trust me, you'd be amazed that sometimes the employees that it appears can't keep, the filing system straight, has a note about everything you ever said and did in the organization, because now they're getting a court case together. And they were smart enough to consult somebody outside the organization to find out how to do it. And that's just the truth of the matter. And so you're the one blindsided, and they have their case, and then they file a suit, and guess what? They win. So anyway, performance standards, they're needed, they're necessary. They create the picture of what success looks like in the various elements, and the elements represent the core duties of the job, the core responsibilities, the core activities that the person will be doing. Some are critical, some are not. Again, we can do a whole training on it. But let me please encourage you to take some time right now to look at what you've put on paper. And if you don't have anything on paper, get something on paper. So my name is Angela Hooper-Menifield. And again, I'm the Chief Equipping Officer of Menifield Associates. I love, again, to talk about performance measurements. Hey, Auntie Yvonne, how are you? And I just want to encourage you guys to get it right, because we want you to keep your good employees, and we want the people who work for you to feel like they were fairly assessed based on their work product, and they had an accurate and clear understanding before the assessment on what would be the gauge. Have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you guys on Friday. Bye.